Hi everyone, and welcome to another catch-up video in my 12 Journals of 2016 series. As you will know if you've been following this series, all of my pages have been based on Tim's 12 tags of 2016, and I am running a little bit late, but I hope to have them all finished and bound very shortly. So this is my December page. So I am starting out this time using a printed piece of paper for my starting point, and I'm hoping to create this lovely sort of patchwork effect. I'm going to have a little bit of foliage, and they are the two main elements that I'm going to take from Tim's tag. Obviously a Christmassy theme will be used as well. So my page measures 10¼ inches by 7 inches, and as usual I'm going to score it first at 5 inches, rotating by 180 degrees, and again scoring at 5 inches, and this gives me a 1/4 inch gusset in the middle of my journal page, and this will allow for any of those embellishments that you will see me using as I create this gorgeous Christmassy patchwork. So this is a Christmas paper, but I'm going to be using the less fussy side. I'm going to be using the red because it makes a nice backdrop for the patchwork that I'll be creating on top of the page. So you can see a little bit tricky to get that gusset in place, but once it's there, this will be the area that allows for the use of slightly thicker embellishments, and also will help us join it into our journal when we're finished. I've cut 2 tags from this leaded snow paper, and I have cut some strips to go across. So the tags measure 5¼ inches by 6 inches, and the strips that go across the top are a 3/4 inch deep. So I'll repeat some of those measurements as we go along. Now the trick to making a patchwork is to find yourself some Christmas papers that are coordinating. So I've been through the scraps of paper in my collection, and I'm picking out pieces like this to create patches with, to create a patchwork look on my page. So I'm starting out by cutting lots of little different sized patches, and I will trim them as I go along and work out what spacing and what orientation these patches are going to be used. It's worth laying them out and having a little bit of an idea of where you're going with your patches, and I've decided to almost create a frame around the page and leave a space in the middle where I can put my quote or my words, and a little space in the top right hand corner where I can add some foliage. So that's where I'm going with this, and I'm going to stitch them in place using my sewing machine. So it's handy to work with your paper trimmer nearby so that you can allow a border all the way around each of your pieces. It's almost like creating a paper mosaic. And I need a narrower strip of this piece which is going to fit in there, and you can see I will trim some of these shapes as I go. And as usual, you'll get to a certain point where you think, right, I'm going to start to stitch some of these into place, and I'm going to start by just adding a little bit of glue on the back of each of my pieces, and that will just hold them in place so that I can stitch them. So I'm going to create that little gap in the middle so that I can have some words, and I'm going to start gluing some of these into place. I'm not going to try doing all of them at once, just in case I catch them with the sewing machine as I'm working around each of these little shapes. You can see this one needs trimming just a little bit. A little bit more. And then gluing that back into position. So you can see I've got a nice red border around each of my shapes, and then I'm going to stitch in black around each of the shapes. So I'm not really going to show you a huge amount of this process because, well, it's a little bit boring from this angle. So you can see how I'm getting on, and I'm going to keep going on with this till I've created my frame, and I'll show you how to deal with those tails and odds and ends of thread at the end. I'm also going to stitch the strip, which is 3/4 of an inch by 6 inches, to the top of what will become one tag, but the two sides of my tags. And the tags, just because I mentioned it a little bit quick last time, measure 6 inches by 5¼ inches. So I'm creating the tag out of one of the papers that I'm using for one of the patches, so it should all coordinate with the main page. So I'm going to stitch the strip to the tag and all the way around the tag too. So as I said, I will do this to both sides of the tag, and on one side I'm going to stitch Tim Holtz's original inspiration, so I'll stitch that into place, and on the opposite side I will stitch my journaling spot and the photograph that I've chosen for the memory that goes with this page. Okay, so I've done all that sewing. Now it's time to do something about all of those threads. Now some of you might like, oh, there's my head popping in there. Some of you might like to keep lots of thread dangling, and I like a little bit, so I like to neaten it up a little bit. So some of these threads I'm going to tie off and cut short and have them showing on the top of the tag. And some of them on the patchwork I'm going to get rid of, and I will show you how to do that. So either way, you're going to pull the threads through to the side that you want them to be on. So in this case, I'm going to tie them in the corner. And so I've got all 4 threads from stitching the picture of Tim's tag through to the front of the tag. And I'm going to just tie them in a couple of knots, and then I'm going to trim them roughly to about 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch in length. So they're still there. You can still make a feature of them, but they're a little bit tidier than leaving them really long. Now some of them, if they're at the very edge of your work, you can just tie off. You don't need to pull the threads through to one side, because they quite easily are knotted at the edge of your piece. So that's tidied up all the threads on one side of my tag, and I will do the same on the other side of the tag. And the other technique that I'm going to show you is what to do if you don't want any of the threads showing on the front of your work. So this time all I'm doing is pulling the threads through to one side. And you could knot them if you wanted to, but I've found that it's quite quick and easy to cover them in glue so that they stick to your work. You can see here, and that way nothing's going to come undone. So I'm pulling all of the threads through to the reverse of the page. And like I said, you could knot them if you wanted extra safety at this point. Quite get that through. I'm just going to trim them roughly to 3/4 inch and then gluing them down. And once that glue's set, nothing's going to go anywhere. So 2 techniques, one to hide them all together, and 2 to make a feature of them on the front of your work. So once I created my patchwork, I went through all of my bits and pieces in my Christmas embellishment box and found lots of different pieces that I could put as a feature on the patchwork pieces that I've got sewn onto my page. So I've got some silver snowflakes. So this is all about having fun, just embellishing those little patchwork squares and oblongs that you've created. And I'm adding a couple of those sort of foiled snowflakes so that they will act as an embellishment once I get those words in place. I've got 2 Tim Holtz mirror stars. I've got 2 little Tim Holtz roses, resin roses. I've got a Christmas brad. Not quite sure which company they're from, maybe someone like My Mind's Eye. Another 3 little brads to add to the patchwork piece with the reindeer on. A little bit of foam tape for this sticker that came out of a scrapbooking Project Life pack. So you can use all sorts of bits and pieces. I'm going to use a couple of silver charms. I've got some reindeer and some angels, which I'm going to attach with brads to make sure that they stay in place. I could have sewed them in place actually. I've got a couple of little puffy stars, which is from a bit of trim. And you can see how it just brings a bit of life to my patchwork, a bit like doing the embroidery if you were doing the patchwork in real life. Now be careful when you're piercing any holes for brads, particularly if you are using a craft knife like I am. I couldn't find my piercing tool, which would have been a little bit safer, but I'm just attaching the little charms with a small brad at the top. If you want a little bit more movement, you could add a jump ring and then attach it with a brad, and you get a little bit more dangle and a little bit more movement on your little charms. So it's all about having a little bit of fun and coordinating your Christmas embellishments with the Christmas patches that you've created. And of course, no Christmassy project would be finished without some bling. So I'm going to add a few little red gems and some sparkle using some stickles. So a liberal sprinkling with some red and white gems. And then I'm just going to add a little further embellishment to my pattern papers with some glittery stickles. So this is a fun way to add sparkle to any patterned paper. So I'm just picking out some of the features like the berries on the holly paper and just adding little dots of sparkle. So put that to one side to dry, and just thinking of how I am going to decorate the top of the tag. I think I'm going to add a little piece of Christmas ribbon. And this one matches the red quite nicely. I'm not quite going to get the whole phrase on there, so I'm just going to half the ribbon, and then I'm going to hold it in place with a brad and another little silver reindeer charm. And of course I will do a little bit of journaling about the Christmas project that I've got as my photograph and memory on my December page. As usual, I'm going to add the month and the year, so December 2016, to the top of the tag, and this will show at the edge of my journal page once the tag is in position. So that just about fit in there nicely. And I'm also going to write my little quote, "'Tis the season to be jolly." I think maybe I should have put this in, or group this the opposite way around and put the "'Tis the season" on the left hand page and "To be jolly" on the right, but I didn't do it that way. I didn't think the green letters stood out enough, so I'm hoping that I've got enough letters on this scrapbook sheet of letters to write my whole quote. And they stand out nicely against that red background. wonder how many people are going to read that and think, that's a very strange quote. To be jolly, 'tis the season. So the next thing that I did was cut out some foliage. This used a Tim Holtz Christmas foliage strip die. Now I've got some holly cut out and some which looks a little bit like fern, and I'm going to group that as he had it on his tag, just a little bunch of Christmas greenery in the top right hand corner of my page, and I've got a little ribbon to tie it all together. So gluing the ribbon down and then tucking the foliage underneath. So I've picked out two greens that I think are in the papers that I've used, and I've got the sprigs of fir or fern and a little bit of holly, and I decided that I would use some bells for the berries of the holly. So when I was getting the bells out, there was some wire, paper covered wire in the box, and I thought actually that would be quite a good way to attach them to my page, almost using the wire like a brad. So posting the wires through the page and then opening them up at the back to keep those bells in place. I could also have stitched them or perhaps used a hot glue gun, but this way they will jingle a little bit if I vigorously shake my journal. So, and they're just the right size, these little bells, to act as holly berries in this Christmas arrangement. You can see how I'm opening up the wires at the back of the page. Because of the brads and because of those wires, I am going to cover what will become the inside of the pocket. I could use any of pieces of scrap card in order to do this, but I kept it matching just in case anyone peeks into the pocket. And I've cut them slightly smaller than the page itself, and just making sure that I cover up all those brads and that they don't catch the tags that are going to go inside and or in and out of these pockets, and then gluing them into place. So it just neatens everything up. So I think I'm almost there. At this point I did the U shape around the right hand side of the page, which acts as a bit of a gap creator so that it makes the tags easy to go in and out of these pockets. So I'm stacking up 3 strips of card around the edge of the right hand page. So I'm making sure that I avoid the very edges by roughly a 1/16 of an inch, and also the fold when I do that bottom edge. I'm using glue because it has no sticky residue, which double-sided tape would do, and this is where my video ran out. So it was all finished. If you want to see a complete version of how to create that U shape, then you could easily just pop along and watch one of the other pages. So I'm lucky that it stopped at this point, because every page has one of these U shapes of card used to give spacing for the easy removal and adding of the tag in between the pages. So this is the final page, and I think you can see how I got my inspiration from Tim's original tag. It translates really nicely into a journal page, and this was the memory. And my memories in December of crafting is that there's never enough time for all the projects that you dream up. But this was one I did actually get to be made, and I will share a link to this video if you're interested in how to make this gorgeous scene inside a book at the end of the video, with the other links that I always leave there for you. I did join this page to my November page. You can see the November tag there at the left hand side of the picture, but again the video ran out, so you'll have to check out one of the other pages to see exactly how that's done. So I am gradually catching up with this 2016 journal, and I'll bring you more news of a 2017 journal very shortly. So if you've enjoyed this and want to play along in the future, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the like button, and of course that all important share button to spread the news and the creativity. Happy New Year to everyone that may be watching this for the first time, and I look forward to sharing more with you very soon. Thank you for watching. So the first link is to the playlist for my 2016 journal, and you will have all the pages there that I've done so far. This is the Christmas project that you saw on my journaling, and this is a fun video and a great project to make as a Christmas keepsake. And then last but not least, a link to my Etsy shop where you'll find bigger projects like this one, where you can store all your tags if you're making them and playing along with Tim Holtz 12 tags of 2016 and running a bit late like I am. So the perfect place to store your beautiful tags.